I need people to understand that employee engagement is just a part of employee experience, and we need to decenter the idea of employee engagement from the experience. The experience is in your process. The experience is in your policies. The experience is in how you design the way people work. It's a bigger, broader thing, and it's part of your operations. And I think people try to back into it. So let's create employee experience. And then what I hear is, let's create the person who's the event planner. Let's create the person who is the pizza parties and ice cream parties. And so I tell leaders now when I work with them, there is a reason people eat multiple times a day, because I'm going to eat your pizza and I'm going to be satiated in that moment, and I'm going to be hungry later. And then I'm going to remember that I hate you.
Hello, friend.
Hey, Chris.
Kalifa. Finally meet in person.
I know. Like, as I am embarking on this journey as an author, as I'm doing some of my own thing.
Throw it out there one more time.
Am I embarking on my journey as an author?
Yeah.
I
made it happen.
I made it happen. I feel like I fell into it.
You don't fall into being an author. That's a crazy compliment.
You never set out to do something.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
Right.
I never thought I'd be here.
That's what I'm saying.
To be
and
fair.
It's like you have something to do and you have something to say, and it kind of calls you. I think that's what happened to me. And I realized I had a story to tell. And, one of the first sets of people that came to me was you and Shane, because I don't know if you all noticed, but you all were probably the first podcast that I decided to agree to do.
Really? And then everyone messages you for every podcast, every event. That's what happens, though.
I credit you all for helping me find my voice and recognizing that people really they wanted to hear what I had to say. And so all the time I credit y'all. I'm fans. I'm fans of the HR Leaders podcast.
Yeah. Tell everyone because people remember you from the show from before, right? So, but obviously it's been a while. Where are you now, company-wise, what you're up to? And obviously we'll talk and introduce the books right there. Grab it. I'll grab it for you.
The book. Okay. So where am I now? I work at Ford. I am the Director of Employee Experience Analytics. So as you know me, I'm always very focused on employee experience and how we use data to make better decisions. So I've done that in my career. I've also been doing a lot of executive advising. And I call it experience coaching, helping people to really understand work. So I've been working with a lot of companies, startups, Fortune 500s on that. And, while I was, doing some extra stuff.
So whilst you got some extra time outside of those two things, you know how crazy that sounds?
I got a little extra time. So I wrote,
whilst being a mom of three, just for casually.
Three my young babies, I wrote this. And so this was a product.
For audio listeners.
Oh, I Think I Love My Job. That's the name of the book. And it came out on June 21st, which also happened to be my birthday.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Intentional.
Again, this was something that just happened to happen with the publisher. And then we were thinking of days and I joked. I'm like, why don't we bring it out in June? She's like, what about June 21st? And I was like, yes, that is also my birthday. She's like, oh, perfect. So it just lined up really well.
Should've got you like a cake that looks like
that. Looks like this, right? I probably should order that. I'm having a big celebration finally in Atlanta Friday. So I never thought of that, but I probably should have a big cake. But I wrote this because throughout the years, especially like when we talked, people would always come to me more about the employee experience. And one of the things I've worked really hard on is, while I am a data nerd, I recognize everybody else.
Wait, no one ever, if I had to guess, right, and I met you for the first time, and I would never say data nerd.
See, and that's what I am.
You probably do the very last thing, probably all the way at the opposite end. Sorry, of the spectrum, I would say, yeah, it's data nerd.
Listen, I'm a full-on data nerd. Like, I love data patterns and stuff, but I recognize that it also makes employee experience very inaccessible for a lot of people because everybody else is not a data nerd. And most people just want to solve the problem, or they want to understand their experience. And so when I wrote this, I tried to write this in my voice in a very practical way where at the end of the day, you can ask yourself, do I do I think I love my job? And so that's where this came from.
Yeah. What's the subline?
It says secrets to designing a people-centered employer value proposition that you can actually boast about.
I like the way you add that last bit.
Because everybody's trying to do, I create employee experience. No, you don't. Mm-hmm. You create terrible employee experiences. I want to help you create things that you can boast about.
Who's this for then?
So it's different groups of people. So I want executives or HR leaders who are focused on trying to understand how to build good employee experiences from the time somebody joins a company to the time somebody leaves the company. In fact, as far as when somebody just applies for the company.
Maybe even returns.
Right. Even retires.
Boomerangs.
Like, how do you create experiences from the very beginning in the design of your process so that HR no longer feels like this transaction? It feels like an experience, because the idea is when people apply for your job, they're buying this product from you, right? And we don't see that. They're buying what you are saying is your employer value proposition. They're buying the product. So the way I put it is, if I go to a store and you advertise to me that this is what I'm getting, and then I buy it and that's not it, I'm gonna be pissed.
We spoke about that before, haven't we?
Yeah.
And they leave just as quickly.
And they
spend all this time, energy, and money.
Right. And
you're like, wait a minute, this is not what I signed up for.
And we've normalized, unfortunately, in companies doing that. We've normalized just, hey, this is what I'm selling. I go in and that's not what it is. But the problem with being an employee is you can't just leave that fast. You can't just switch to another role. You can't say like, I'm working at this place, I don't like it, I'm a switch. Like I'm a switch tomorrow and start working somewhere else. And so we need to understand what we're providing. So it's for people who have to make those decisions, the people who have to invest in those decisions, which will even include your CFO. I love having conversations with CFOs because they see employee experience as
Who are those 4 people?
Nice to have.
Who are those 4 people? Did you say there's 4 people?
So it's CFOs, HR leaders, which are HR practitioners, CHROs, and the last group of people are people who are at work trying to understand what's happening at their job, right? So in the book, I talk about primarily how do you build these experiences for people, but I also help people understand if you're not having certain experiences, is this the place you want to be? Can you answer the question, do you like your job? Right? And so sometimes you have to learn that maybe some of these things are changeable and some of these things mean that this is not a place for you. And every room is not for you, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So
that's an interesting one, because you're basically saying, which people might not want to hear it, you need to own your own experience.
Yes. Yeah, because work should be an experience.
You can sit there and complain and constantly be doing like, this ain't going to change.
Right. So and you may not be able to change it because there may be variables at work that cannot be changed because you don't have the power to change it and you're not the person making the decisions to change it. And so you also have to recognize at what point do you walk away, right? Or what point do you realize that you need to adjust your inputs in order to make that work? In my theory, the way I discuss employee experience, it's not about happiness, which is a very controversial way. Everybody like, oh, are you happy at work? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're happy. Like, employee experience is something that's provided by organizations. And that's really hard for people to conceptualize because we haven't talked about it that way. Employee experience is about how do you set up people for success? Because that's what people want to do. They want to do their work and they want to succeed. And organizations provide employee experience. The way people experience work is satisfaction. Are you satisfied? Are you content? Do you feel like you could succeed? And so basically, when I'm asking you, do you love your job? I'm asking you, not if you're happy. I'm asking you, do you think that you can succeed in your job? And that's how it's easier to tie it to a business outcome.
Do they have to be mutually exclusive?
They don't have to
Happiness
be.
And success?
No, it's a happy side effect. Happiness is a happy side effect
of success.
Whereas
people are kind of looking for happiness first, then success.
Right. And then they're pulling happiness from work when sometimes they're ignoring happiness from elsewhere. Your happiness could come from work, but it could also come from home. It can also come from your friends.
You see it with a lot of people that, I've seen it with people that retire, where their happiness was fully baked into work, and then they don't know what to do with themselves.
They don't know what to do, and they waste away.
With mental health and all sorts. Like you see it with like athletes.
I was thinking the same thing. Athletes, because we've
their self-worth almost.
Yes, we've tied our entire happiness proposition, if you will, into work, when your happiness doesn't necessarily have to come from work, and it's okay if it doesn't.
Is it the responsibility of organizations for people to make people happy?
No. And I think when we phrase it that way, it sounds weird. Organizations do not have the responsibility of creating happiness. I'm
glad you said that, but it's interesting because the new generation, I think even the current everyone, it feels like there is this responsibility now for the company to go to a responsibility for your happiness.
Because I think we're using happiness wrong. I think when you get down to the brass tacks of what people are talking about, they want flexibility. That's not happiness. That's, again, the ability to be set up for success. It's the ability to balance their life so that they can be successful.
So that causes them, I'm very happy with this because I have the flexibility.
Exactly.
I'm very happy because I have X, but that's... Yeah.
Right. We're placing a big burden on organizations to make people happy, but we're also giving them an out because we're saying, well, they're not happy and there's nothing I can do about it, right? Like, there's something you can do about it. You can set them up for success. You could create policies and processes that are people-centered in their design, and people then feel like they're set up for success. But instead, we use words like happiness, which is so subjective.
That's the reason I read it. I think part of it is that we're using the word happiness. Like, you're right. Like, we shouldn't be using the word happiness.
Right.
It's
so subjective. Yeah. Like, what makes you happy and me happy are two different things. And we happiness for one person is their cat.
It's so weird because 10, 20 years ago, when you wouldn't even associate the word happiness in the workplace. I know it sounds really bad, but when I started, there was no responsibility of my manager or company to my happiness, but my success, and for me developing and growing, etc. But there's I don't know, when do you think this sort of shift happened where it's like everyone's like, your job is to make me happy, I'm your employee, I want all the benefits, I want all the cherries on top, and where did that come from?
You ready for me to say something controversial?
Good, right here. You didn't come all the way across the world.
It's when companies started asking for loyalty.
So it's like, hey, if you want my loyalty, you need to make me happy. Basically do whatever I say.
Yeah, because you're asking for something that is outside the scope of what you provide, right? And you're asking me to be loyal to you whether or not you choose to be loyal to me, which is a one-sided agreement. And so if you're asking me, people will associate, if I have to be loyal to you, if you think of what loyalty is, why, if I use Game of Thrones, if I bend the knee to you, then you need to provide me with something that makes me feel good about doing that. And so companies don't have to be loyal to people, and people don't have to be loyal to companies, because we're using the wrong word. Do you know what I mean? I think we've started using these words because they're emotive and they're non-measurable. I can't truly measure your loyalty to me, and I can't truly measure your happiness, but I can measure if I'm setting you up for success. I can measure whether there are development opportunities. I can measure whether your employee experience is good or your candidate experience is good. I can measure these things, and that's success. But we started using words like, I want you to be loyal, and then we started doing what I consider stupid stuff.
Imagine saying loyal in a job spec.
Yeah, right.
Loyalty.
Yeah,
of course it's important, but you can't.
Right, loyalty is something that is earned over time.
That's exactly the way.
Yeah, and loyalty is supposed to be
same with trust.
Right, trust and respect.
Yeah.
Right, and it should be mutual. It shouldn't be one-sided. And I think we've started using these emotive words to try to get people to feel guilty about not being happy at work. And I'm like, if we take away the idea that people need to be happy at work, and we really start thinking about what we're really talking about, satisfaction, set up for success, feel like they can grow, feel like this company has their best interests at heart, then people give back in the exact same way, because people's propensity to stay at a job, I think we have this weird notion that people want to leave jobs. Do you know how much work it is to leave a job and find another job?
It's so stressful.
It is so, and trust me, I know.
Kids. I got one and I'm stressed.
Right. It's so stressful to leave a job and go through
relationships you got to rebuild.
Yeah.
You got to build your trust and credibility all over again.
Yes.
So much.
Right. So you have to understand.
Sometimes it's not worth the extra money, man.
Right.
You're like, I thought it was. Like, we're not going to take me back.
Yeah,
it's not, because that's not going to change. That really isn't. That extra money ain't going to change my life.
It's not going to do, because my quality of life does not change when I change that job. And so I think we think people want to leave, but sometimes it's not worth it.
Yeah.
And do you know how aggravating you have to be as a company to make somebody say, I want to go through all of that?
It's true.
I want to go through all that pain. You know how aggravating you have to be. People's natural propensity is they want things that are predictable. The relationships that they build, even the devil they know, they prefer. So when you find people running out the door to find something else, do you understand how aggravating you have to be as a manager?
Me and Shane was so aggravated that we started a company. We were like, we took the extreme after 10 years of service in that company. We were like, fine, if you're not going to willing to listen, we're going to create our own company. Like, I wish I could say this beautiful story about how HR Leaders was born, but it was really born out of frustration.
Exactly.
Of like, our us listening to customers and them constantly telling us what they want, and then our leadership and owners just ignoring every single piece of feedback.
I believe that.
To the point where we're like, oh, the money's really good. I really enjoy working with all these people. I built my entire career here. I think 2 years we had a conversation, and then we finally were
just went for it.
2 years we said that those Starbucks.
But it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Like, all right, let's do it. What would you say is the biggest misconception about employee experience?
I think people think that it's about how people feel, as in we think, how do you feel about the job, right? I think that's the biggest misconception, that it's about the employee and it's on the employee only to experience work a specific way. And that's why people lie on surveys, because you're asking me how I feel and I know you want a specific answer. I think employee experience is something that is measurable. It's not just about engagement, and it is the responsibility of the organization. It is a product of the organization.
Yeah. When you see companies, all of a sudden, 5 years ago, these roles started being created. It's kind of a new role, right?
Yes.
Where do you see companies make the biggest mistakes?
I think they set up these expecting miracles immediately. And again, because it's so centered on feelings, and they're also centered on this idea of engagement. And I need people to understand that employee engagement is just a part of employee experience. And we need to decenter the idea of employee engagement from the experience. The experience is in your process. The experience is in your policies. The experience is in how you design the way people work. It's a bigger, broader thing, and it's part of your operations. Mm-hmm. And I think people try to back into it. So let's create employee experience. And then what I hear is, let's create the person who's the event planner. Let's create the person who is so there's pizza parties and ice cream parties. And so I tell leaders now when I work with them, there is a reason people eat multiple times a day, because I'm going to eat your pizza. And I'm going to be satiated in that moment, and I'm going to be hungry later. And then I'm going to remember that I hate you.
It's a temporary.
It's a temporary fix. And so you have to understand, these pizza parties and these ice cream parties are nonsense.
You can do all those things and still go back into a toxic manager.
Absolutely.
And then be like, well, my entire experience is ruined.
Right.
I have to.
I will eat your pizza and hate you. I will eat my pizza and glare at you at the same time and be trying to get out. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think we trivialize
in the book. A key concept that you talk about is people-centered design. What do you mean by that?
So it's asking the question when you are starting to, at the very beginning of your design, or if you're redesigning something, it's asking the question, how will this process, or how will this policy, how will this thing impact a specific segment of people, right? And you design that into your processes. So let's say you're creating new, in general, let's go with return to office policies, because everybody's talking about it. And you're creating that. You ask yourself, okay, how does this new policy impact let's choose people with disabilities or different abilities. If we make the process this way, how does it negatively or positively affect this group? And you can adjust your policies as you need, which might be, let's look at how do we do reasonable accommodations? How do we make sure that there are enough places that if people with different abilities or disabilities came in and they did it, do we have rooms for them to be in, right? If this person, for example, is in a wheelchair and we're telling everybody they have to come to work and now everybody's hot desking it, so there's no assigned seating, where does this person sit? Is there a table that can go up and down? So should this person be in the office, right? And
or at least accommodate for it.
Right. How do you accommodate? So people-centered design is asking yourself, the different people and segments and personas that you have in your workforce, as you design, how does it affect these different people? And is this the right thing? If it's negatively affecting a whole bunch of people, rethink your design. Right? It doesn't mean you don't make the policy. It means you rethink how you design the policy. Thinking about like pregnant mothers. When you're designing parking, should you have a place where people who are expecting kids should park that's closer, right? So it's just designing work in a way that you think of people. Because again, if you think of employee experiences, how are you setting up people for success? Right? No matter who they are. And that's why one of the things, and I talk about this in the book, when we think about DEI, because we know there's this whole DEI pushback and whatever.
Did you see this stuff on the weekend?
I did.
It's insane.
I did.
I wrote it in one of my documents. Do you remember what he said DEI stands for? It was like division, like, I wrote it down somewhere, but yeah, it was crazy.
I know the guy from SHRM said some stuff too.
Division something and then like indoctrination or something. Like it was something crazy.
And it's silly and
it's so ridiculous.
Right. And in the book, I said what DEI really stands for is designing everything inclusively. That's it.
Oh, I like that.
That's what it is. It's really just thinking through how you design things, because if you think about the employee experience and you're always thinking about how you're designing people with people in mind, DEI just becomes a regular part of the job.
Why do you think, so I just found because I'm writing a video about this because I really want to share my voice and show support. It was at what was the convention again? Was it
SHRM? It was SHRM?
No, is it the Donald Trump's
convention? Republican National Convention.
You're right. So Ron DeSantis, who's also
Florida guy.
The guy that did
we call him Florida man.
Yeah. He's part of his speech. He said DEI stands for division, exclusion, and indoctrination.
Right. Foolishness. Because the only way it stands for that is if you want it to stand for that. And the only way that even makes sense is if you think of DEI and diversity very narrowly, because you think that you're the same. You think that the key is exclusiveness when the key should be the opposite, which is inclusiveness. And being inclusive is not that scary when you really think about how you design things. If you are, let's think about just a basic thing, a phone. If I am trying to make money off of a phone, do you know what I do? I sit down and think about my customers. And I go, well, what if this person has this disability or this different ability? Or what if this person is reading from right to left instead of left to right, because different languages are like that? What if this person is in the UK versus America? I think about how I create menus that are easy to navigate through to simplify that process for different people. So you cannot tell me you don't think about diversity. You do it in order to make your products for your customers effective. But somehow it becomes an ugly word when you think about it in the education system, or you think about it in as an employee.
Why are they weaponizing DEI?
Because it's easy. Because I think
what's the win? I don't understand.
I don't get it either. I think hate is just a heck of a motivation, but
clearly they must be doing it. They've got some type of data that's telling them that if we keep saying this, we're winning voters.
They are.
So what? But why? Like why?
Because I think hate is easy. Hate is easy. Trying to drive fear, I think it's the other, right? So one of the examples that I remember I talk about all the time is I understand why other is seen as a threat. right? When you think of survival, the other is the threat all the time. And so if we keep othering people, it becomes easier to say us versus them, because the idea that you can do something different or somebody's different from you, it makes you uncomfortable. And humans just don't like to be uncomfortable. So what we're doing is we're leaning into people's discomfort, converting it into fear and othering people in order to blind them to the fact that this is not really that big of a deal.
But they're really like, because
they've weaponized.
I was researching this on the weekend, and it's the first time I came across white replacement theory. You know about that?
Yeah, the idea that, if I recall it is correctly, the idea that over time that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to replace the white race.
Yeah, and I'd never come across that before. As a white man, I had no idea. So I didn't know there was this huge fear that we're all going to be replaced. But that's what they're leading on.
Right.
That's their leverage.
That's what they're leading on.
Like, I was like, wow. I was like, so the way they describe it is that white people, in their context, we're paying a tax
for being white.
Basically, was part of that narrative as well. And I was like, wow, like maybe it's an American thing, because I've never heard any of that in the UK. Not saying it's not happening,
right?
It's not something that is.
It's something I could say from a US perspective. They're leaning into
really hard,
very
in
hard.
The politics.
The idea that people who are underrepresented and marginalized groups are just suddenly going to replace them.
Yeah,
and I'm like, understand that there's room for everybody. One of the things I always tell people is that we always talk about you coming and you're taking my spot. No, I'm coming and I'm taking a spot. The idea that you believe the spot belongs to you is part of the problem, and it's very telling. It's a spot. I'm not taking your job. I'm taking a job. Right? And I think that is the distinction. Like, we are telling people that that there's this group of people who have come to take these things away from you. I'm like, historically, one, it's quite the opposite. And second, it's not yours. How did you decide it was yours?
That's true, actually. Yeah. Like, where did that entitlement come from in the first place?
How did you decide it was yours? I'm like, hold on.
That's already a part of the problem.
That is because that's a weird narrative. And you keep telling your kids that people are taking their spot. And I'm like, hold on.
Who was in the first place?
It wasn't yours.
That's such a good point. There's so many people probably going over their head. They're like, oh yeah, it's true. Like,
yeah, you just decided it was your spot. Well, good for you. But I also decided it was mine. So how did you decide that I took it from you? Right? Because I could say the same thing, that you taking my spot and I'm taking it back. Right? And so it's that weird us and them thing that we're leaning into. It's scary, especially having young kids. It's scary that you have to constantly teach them that this is not true. This is not true.
All right, flipping back again. We're a bit off topic.
Yes.
But I just wanted to get your thoughts on it, because it's something that was sitting with me on the weekend, and I was just weighing on me, and I was like, I wanted to hear someone else's perspective.
I mean, it's big in HR.
I couldn't believe what I was watching.
It's big, like SHRM. That's what I was talking about. SHRM just had a conference where they said they're taking out the E and DEI, and they're
I haven't heard about this one.
Yeah, and they're not focused on it anymore. The CEO was talking about some real interesting stuff, and I'm like, but this is how it starts. Because if you take out, why would you take out the equity? To it?
Like, would you?
Oh, on the internet, people were not happy.
Really?
Right. Like what is the thing about taking the E? Why is equity so scary? Because it's hard. And so there's this whole thing, and the problem is SHRM is where a lot of HR people, especially the US, get their certifications. And so once you set that precedent, I don't think it was a surprise right after Microsoft completely obliterated the DEI team. Right after. Got rid, they obliterated, got rid of them. Probably.
And you saw the same thing when the legislation was passed. You saw like Meta and loads of big tech. I'm not going to get into all of them. You know, seeing Elon Musk has created like a super group of different founders that he's anti-DEI, anti-this, anti-that. I was like, whoa, like it's.
I'm like, y'all are putting a lot of energy into that. And I'm like, what is your end goal? Like, y'all are putting so much energy into it. Do you know what's just going to happen? There are other countries that people could just go to. It's not that big of a deal. Like, y'all are putting a lot of energy into it. So, like, what are you trying to distract people from? Because
that's normally what I look at it. I'm like, what's the real...
What's the real thing?
What's the real agenda?
Right.
It's like distraction tactic from something actually...
Right. Like, you know, and everybody knows, like, it's, again, that narrow definition of what diversity is. Diversity is geographic diversity, neurological diversity, diversity of thought, ethnic diversity, racial diversity. Like, diversity is not a monolith, and we talk about it as a monolith, as a us and them. But then, so what I tell people is, let me reframe the question that I'm asking you. And I do this a lot because I know that we've politicized DEI, so I won't use those words, but I'm like, let me ask you a different question. Instead of asking the question, how do we get more diversity in this company? Let me ask you a very different question. Ignore that. Forget it. We don't have to worry about DEI. Let me ask you this question. How do we get people in this company with different perspectives that will help us be more innovative and get to the business outcomes and goals that we want to? Now everybody's ready to talk about that.
Yeah.
Because I've taken out the
stigma.
Right, from it. And then everybody's ready to talk. Like, I don't know, how do we do that? How do we find these people? How do we source these people? I'm asking you the exact same question, but I've taken away the words from it.
The fear.
Yes. That makes you feel uncomfortable. And now I'm telling you, let's tie these to real business outcomes. It's the same thing. This is with the same process, the same way you got to go look for talent in different places. So.
One thing we didn't talk about is, going back to the book, is your personal experiences.
Yes.
Because you shared earlier that before we hit record, actually, that when you first wrote the book, you didn't include a lot of those crucible moments, let's call them. Those hard moments that we all experience, right?
The vulnerability.
The vulnerability, and it's hard to be vulnerable.
It is hard.
Talk about how, share some of those experiences with our audience and how that shaped the book and obviously your work that you do.
Yeah. Something that I never had a name for before is what I experienced. So the biggest one for me, and this is in the introduction, where I was promoted to a VP in, I think it was like March, and in July I got laid off, and it hurt. It was the first time in my adult life I woke up and did not have a job, and I knew it wasn't about me. I knew it was a number. I knew it was financial. I knew that there were things that, it wasn't about my work. My work stood for itself, but it hurt, and for a long time I couldn't even say it. And it was crazy because I knew better. I spent my life.
You look at the numbers.
Right. I know the numbers. I understand it. But it happened, and it was like a knife to myself, my career. And then in that moment, I realized how tied my job was to my identity. And I never realized how tied being an employee had been to my identity, in spite of, in my brain, I knew better, but I couldn't get myself out of bed. One of these stories I often tell people is, I remember laying in bed, and my older daughter came up. She was at the time maybe 5 maybe, and she put the blanket over me. She saw I was sad. She put the blanket over me, and she's like, "Mommy, you're sad. Just rest. It'll be okay." And I realized I couldn't even in that moment hide it from her that I was sad, and I felt lost. And I just couldn't say. I didn't even want to tell my parents. Because I felt failure, right? And in moments like that, I didn't talk about it. And then slowly I started to speak to people quietly about what was happening. And I realized there were other people, because at that time, thousands of people were losing their job. That was back in that period. And I started talking to people and realized that I have a voice and a responsibility. I know better. And I have the opportunity to speak to the experience people were having. And I had the experience and the ability and the expertise to explain what workplace trauma was. And that's what I was experiencing, trauma. And there were thousands of people experiencing workplace trauma at that time. And I realized this is a part of the experience I always understood, but never understood. Do you know what I mean?
Until you're in it.
Until I'm in it. I always understood. In my head, in theory, I could write about it, but then I experienced it, and I realized in that moment, I knew better, and this is how I was feeling. So imagine somebody who doesn't know better. imagine somebody who they have completely destroyed
beating
this person's life.
Up, calling themselves a failure, letting it affect their next job,
and then taking it from job to job. So we have a bunch of traumatized leaders who are going to other jobs traumatized and traumatizing those people, and it just carries on like a virus, and we don't talk about it out loud. In the last podcast we did, it was called Saying the Quiet Things Out Loud, and I realized I have to say the quiet thing out loud. And when I was writing a book, I left all that out because I wanted to decenter my experiences from what I know. But then what I realized was, and what the publisher quickly realized, is my experience and who I am also not only just gives credibility, but it humanizes me and it humanizes the story, because I am not alone. And so all of these types of experiences where I had bad management, like when I had somebody, and I think we talked about it before, where I had somebody tell me, she's too smart, she needs to work on that because it makes other people feel stupid. Like those things are
just hearing that again is a crazy.
It's like death by 1,000 cuts.
It's like, wait a minute, I'm being punished because
I'm smart, and that's my performance review. Then
no way, that was your performance.
That was
review.
My performance.
That's the craziest performance review ever.
And
so I'm being punished because other people are uncomfortable.
That I am smart, and I have to. And so a lot of what I had to do was learn to be silent. And so over the last few years, and that's what this book is also, I realized I have a voice and I will speak. I have a voice. If I had to go back and tell my young self something, that you have a voice and you should use it. And every single room that you walk into, you deserve to be in that room. And every room is not for you, and you should never apologize for walking out of that room if you don't think that's where you belong. And so those are the type of experiences I had to realize and write down. And that really influenced me saying, okay, write this thing. So, and here we are.
What would you say is like the uncomfortable conversation around employee experience that everyone's avoiding and no one's talking about, but there really should be?
I think the most uncomfortable conversation is that we are a lot of organizations are willfully ignoring it. And here's an example. During COVID was the absolutely opportune time to get rid of people. People technology doesn't get COVID. We threaten people with technology replacing them all the time. It was the best opportunity for organizations to get rid of people and replace them with technology. It was the biggest social experiment in the world. People died. So you actually had people who, they were out of work and there were these positions that needed to be filled, but you could replace it with technology. Do you know what companies did? They doubled down on employee experience. They doubled down on DEI. They doubled down on their HR functions. They leaned more on their CHROs to help them through it. And now they want people to forget that they did that because you want to revert to pre-2020, right? And so the idea that technology is a threat is not real, because if it was, you would have done it when you had the best opportunity to do it. So it's a willful decision not to invest in employee experience. And that's the sad and uncomfortable thing. The money is there. And a lot of times people think that employee experience is about grand gestures. It's not. People want to be seen, heard, valued. Sometimes they just want you to say thanks, and we willfully just don't do it because we don't want to. And that's the sad part.
Yeah. Like when I've spoke to different employee experience leaders, ones that are successful versus ones that are struggling, as it were, which they don't really want to admit most of the times. One of the things I've noticed is that they're really embedded in the business beyond HR.
Right.
So they have business partners in IT, in operations, in supply chain, everywhere, and they have a big remit. Mm-hmm. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I feel like some companies, they're like operating in like a silo, mm-hmm. and they're wondering why
they're
not having impact.
Right. Because again, it's coming down to your processes, your policies, how you design things. And the people-centered designing things should be a part of all of these things. It should be a part of your IT system. Think about your user experience, right? It should be a part of all of these tools. And we don't do it because it's just too much work to take that extra step. And often what you find in a lot of companies, you're now trying to untangle a mess that you've created and turn it around a ship. Like when it gets toxic, it is hard to fix toxicity. You probably have like 5 or 6 layers of leaders to get rid of in order to really fix a toxic environment.
So then it comes to the point, it's like, do you really mean it when you say you want to do this? Because it requires time, because you're not going to change your culture in 6 months, right? And a lot of companies operate quarter to quarter, right? Shareholder value. Expect a miracle.
Like, listen, I tell people, I am not a magician. I am not a wizard. So I can tell you, I'm an expert, but I will tell you, you got to give yourself about 18 months to do it. And we do it for every other part of the business. We give ourselves time to turn around.
In those first 18 months, so this is a good example, you join Ford, right? Mm-hmm. What does your first 18 months look like? Set you up for success?
Yeah, for me, it's, and one of the things my boss had told me is I really want you to spend some time listening, right? Which is funny because that's what I came in to do. And so it's really just like listening and understanding the business, right? I think a lot of people come in with all the ideas and don't...
But what does that... I want to break that down because people always say that, but can you break that down for the audience?
Listening to do...
Practically, what does that look like?
So talking to not just leaders, talking to peers and people who work up to peers, and really trying to understand the jobs, the roles, and the problems from multiple perspectives, right? Because sometimes leaders have blinders on, whether it's willfully or because a lot of people haven't told them the thing, right?
Oblivious.
Right. Or they choose to be oblivious to it. And so it's not just talking to them.
True.
Right?
I like that.
Right. It's not just talking to them. Let me talk to like people 2, 3, 4 layers down, and really just making connections with people and asking Socratic questions and open questions. I'm not going to go in assuming I understand what's going on. I want you to tell me what you think is going on. And then my job is to listen and truly listen. And too many of us go in and talk because we want to show we're experts. But the best experts I've worked with listen a lot. They listen and take notes a lot. And so that's what I do, and that's what it is. And then you start from the foundation. The hard part about being an employee experience practitioner is a lot of what you're going to do is foundational work. It is not sexy at all. It is the data architecture. It is the contract negotiations. It is really getting down to the brass tacks. And it's also having very uncomfortable conversations with people, especially when you're new. And you have to do it, right? So one of the things, I laugh a lot. So I can find jokes in almost anything, right? And so it's having the uncomfortable conversations, but also saying, well, let's talk through solutions in that conversation. Not just saying, all of this is wrong, right? It's like, have we thought about doing this or that? Because one of the things I always say about leaders is, one, we have created systems where they're not going to tell us they don't know something. And it is hard being a leader too, because you are constantly going to get beat up. You will never do anything right, especially when you're like 2, 3, 4 layers down from the actual executive leadership. You will take hits from everywhere. And then when you're in the middle management, you get hits from above and below. And so I try not to beat them up too much, right? We don't train them, we don't prepare them, and we want them to solve every problem, right? And so it's really having those conversations with them and saying, how can I solve it? So one of the things I've done in my job, and when I'm consulting with people, I say, how can I help you? Another thing I always ask people, okay, how do I make your life easier? What do you need? And I think it's going in with a solution mind. Too often we go in and we ask questions like, okay, what's wrong? And we expect that the person knows what's wrong. They don't.
If they didn't, they won't be talking to you. That's such a crazy question to ask someone who...
Right. And it's because...
So normally in those 2 exploratory open questions you just mentioned, through that you normally uncover...
That's when I uncover stuff.
The real, like...
That's when you uncover what
they don't even know.
Right. Because a lot of times they call it something, but what they're describing is not what they're calling it. So you might have
They might be talking about the symptom, for example.
Exactly.
Not the actual problem.
People love to say, like, for example, oh, we just have too much turnover. And then I'm like, well, talk to me more.
Oh, let's just turn that off then.
Right.
Like it's like a tap.
Right.
Like,
and I'm like, well, tell me more. What do you think is leading to that turnover? And then I'll ask them things about their culture, and I'll ask them about recognition, and I'll ask them about engagement, and I'll ask them about data. And then I realize turnover is only just a reflection of the thing. And by the time you've seen that, you're already 3, 4, 6 months too late. And so one of the things you have to do is be really patient, because it's the expectation that every leader knows the words to describe what's happening, and they don't. And it's okay. I think we need to make it okay for leaders not to know the word for it.
Yeah, but that's all part of so many of the problems that we face in the workplace, whether we talk about well-being, DEI, loads of the topic is actually giving them the language.
Yes.
To even have a conversation.
Yes.
That's half the battle, because people are not even willing. Like, how can you expect them to have a conversation around some of these things if they don't even have the language?
They don't.
To even do that.
They don't. And
they're too worried about saying
the wrong thing,
so they just say nothing. And
right.
I've been the victim of that. I've told you before about sort of like not wanting to post and say certain things. I'm like, oh, what if I say it wrong?
Right. Exactly. And we've all been there. And also, we exist too much in our feelings. And I know that sounds terrible, but we exist in our feelings.
Worried about what other people think of us. And
and
it's really freeing when you kind of just get rid of that.
Yeah, and back it up. Yeah. Take time to build. If you're like, if there is an employee experience practitioner listening at CHRO, take the time to create the room for people to be like, I don't know what you're talking about. Right? Like sometimes in conversations, business conversations, I go, I'll be like, look, you're going to have to explain this to me like I'm a baby, because I do not know what you're talking about.
That's a strength, though.
And it's tough, right? Because it's vulnerability, right? And people are not trained to say that. But I'll be like, you're going to have to explain this to me like a toddler, because I do not understand what you're talking about. And, it often gets people off guard when you say that. But I'm like, give people room to say it in different ways. Give people room to be wrong. Give people that room to recognize that if we have to solve this, sometimes we have to go slow to go fast. We can't just go fast, because then we create new problems, right? And so a lot of times the reason that there is a problem is because people are afraid to say the thing in the first place. Everyone knows there's a problem, right? But no one feels psychologically safe to say that there's a problem, and everybody knows. We do a whole nother show about that. Oh my gosh! Yes. How this is a really random question, like where the stages you are in your life right now, like. Trying to figure out how to frame this. Did you think you'd be where you are right now? Absolutely not. Absolutely. I'm trying to find a better way of phrasing that. Absolutely not. How does it make you feel when you sit back now and like just take a second to reflect on where you started and where you are? How does it make you feel? I feel there's a weird combination of healthy fear, anxiety, I feel pride, right? I feel joy, especially when I realize I'm making a difference, an impact, right? I'll give you an example. There was this I can't remember her name right now, but she read my book and she sent me an email. She said, I want you to know that I read your book and it helped me because I realized I am not crazy. And I'm not alone in this. And I sat there because people would always ask me, why are you writing a book? Why are you writing a book? And I couldn't articulate what that was, because it is fair putting this out there, right? This is putting a lot of my expertise out there. It has opened myself up for criticism. It is, that kind of thing, because you never know how it's going to be received. And once she said that, I remember looking at her email and I sat there and I looked at my husband and I said, this is it. This is why I wrote this book. I wrote this book so people do not feel crazy. Like people do not feel alone and they understand what they're experiencing. It's not unique, but we have the power to change the thing. And I think that is how I feel. I feel like I'm in a position now where I can have an impact more broadly. And, if you asked me 5 years ago, or 4 years ago when we first met, if you asked me, I would tell you I'd be heads down working. I might tell you that, I'm trying to be on a CHRO path. That is not where I am. And life hit me with some 1-2 punches, right? Life will humble you. And then, from 2020 to 2022 to 2023, actually up to 2020, you feel like you're living in a fever dream that won't let up, right? I feel like please get me off of this timeline, right? But now I'm like, you know what, Kalifa, you have a voice. You can say the thing. You can be an expert. You should never apologize for being smart. You shouldn't use humor, which is what I used to do. You shouldn't use humor to shrink yourself. Now I use humor to promote the conversation, right? It's really just reframing. I have always been this person. I was telling my husband last night, I'm like, I probably spent the last 3 years searching for myself, searching for me, especially with all the changes, all the things that have happened, all the bad experiences I've had with a couple of companies, the consultant, trying to find myself. But then I realized I was never lost. I needed to lose things, and I needed to lose some people. But I was never lost. I was always there. I needed to just stop and embrace that and not be so afraid to be Kalifa and put my name on it and be unapologetic about it. And, when I'm wrong, I say I'm wrong. If I have a change in opinion on something, I say it because I'm human. And so for me, at this point in my life, at this point in my career, don't ask me how I get it all done. I don't know.
You just make it happen. When you really want to do something, you find the time.
It's nuts, right? But I think I'm at a place now where I'm like, you know what, Kalifa, what's more important to you right now is not necessarily to be an advisor, a consultant, an employee, a leader. It's to be a human who's trying to have an impact on other humans and doing it the best way you know how with the expertise that you have.
Yeah.
In whatever format you could do it.
Well, listen, I know we have only just met in person for the first time, but we've been friends for 4 or 5 years. Yeah. And I'm super proud of you. What you've achieved, you absolutely smashed it.
Thank
what you've
you.
achieved as a parent, as a wife, as an author.
Look at Chris trying to make me cry in here. I'm not gonna do it though.
Honestly, it's like most people listening probably it's and you found yourself along the way, like you said, to your point, and most importantly
I did
as well, you found your purpose.
Yes.
And you leaned into it.
Yes, I found a voice. I was willing to take risks, and that's what I love about y'all.
That's what's on the other side of fear, everyone.
Yes.
So a lot of times is you think that the scariest things on the other side of that is magic. It doesn't feel that way. It's really scary, and
it is so scary.
Being vulnerable and putting yourself out there. A book's a big example of doing that, or taking the risks you have with your career. Just all of those moments are very scary.
They're scary.
But you learn a lot about yourself.
You do.
Along the way.
And what you can take. And you also see who's around you, right?
To the point of, you sometimes have to remove some people.
You have to lose some people. I was saying the other day that, a lot of people like to talk about haters. And I'm like, you ain't got no haters. And people talk about haters. And I'm like, it's easy to talk about haters and people who are against you. And it's easy to look at the people who you think are going to laugh at you when you fail. But I'm like, what a lot of people need to start paying attention to is what happens when you succeed.
Then you
really know who's for you, because it's easy for people to pretend that they care when you fail. Even if they laugh behind your back, they can pretend that they will help you. Yeah. But for some reason, success makes some people so your success makes other people.
I've lost family members over this, and close friends.
So uncomfortable.
And and I gave up apologizing for that.
Exactly. And it's hard, right?
I'm not.
You don't need it in your life.
I don't need
You don't need it
it's
because
hard.
Because the people who are for you will celebrate with you too. And they will truly have joy in your success. And it's easy to say, well, when you fail, you see who laughs at you. Those aren't the people who expose themselves. The people who are mad at you for being successful, or even mad at you for being more successful than them, those are the people you need to get rid of.
Yeah.
Those are the poisons that take away your joy. And I'm at a stage in my life that I like peace.
That, again, to wrap this up as well, that also translates back to the employee experience.
Yes.
If you're in a company that you're feeling the same way, that you have, for example, a manager that also makes you feel that way, like, you can take control back.
You can take the control back.
Believe in yourself that you can do that. Like, you know, many people just stick it out. And I understand we've all got mortgages to pay, we've all got child support, but there are options.
There are options, and you could time it out, and you could talk to people, and you can get out there, you can build your network, right?
Yeah.
Like, something will happen, but you have to
take control of it.
You have to take control.
Don't be a victim.
And you have to take control of your fear, right? Like, let me tell you, when I sent you all the message saying, how about I come to London? And Phil, that was fair. I'd never been to London before.
I was like, what? You coming?
But I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it because I said I will, and I want to, and it's a risk, and it's something that I will do. And I'm here. And I'm excited.
Made it happen. Well, listen, before I let you go, where can people grab the book? And also, if they want to connect with you, follow you,
yes. So you can connect with me anywhere. I'm mostly found on LinkedIn, but I'm on TikTok. So, you know,
You're on TikTok?
I am. Okay. Dr. Kalifa O. So
I want to see something.
I took
I want to see you on TikTok.
I took a long time to get on TikTok because I'm old. I'm old, y'all. But I got on there and I have fun on there now. I still only do short content. I have YouTube if you want longer resources on there. My website is KalifaOliver.com. But if any social media you're looking at me, it's Dr. Kalifa O. You could pick up the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere your favorite books are sold. On my website if you want it signed. And audiobook, Apple Books, and I narrated it, which was also a fun experience. So Apple Books or audible.com. And I know I sent some.
You did an audiobook?
I did.
No way. I'm listening to that. I'm audio, like, I listen to everything on audio.
I sent some promo codes. So I have sent over to y'all 5 promo codes for the audiobook for free download for you and your
So what we'll do then for the audience, we're going to post this on LinkedIn. The first, how many did you send? 5. First 5 people that repost it on LinkedIn, we're going to give you the promo code.
You got the promo codes, free audiobook.
All right. So I can see it. It's very simple. I'll look at the first 5 people that repost it. Doesn't count for my team because they're going to repost it quick. I just want to make sure I do that before. That's a good caveat, actually, because my team will, I reposted it. I'm like, no, don't count as well. So first 5 people.
First 5 people.
But listen, before I let you go, I appreciate you coming. It's so nice to see you in person.
Yes, I'm very
really happy
excited
for you as well. And I'll obviously wish you all the best until next week.
I mean, happy for me. Hello? I am a fan. I'm a fan. And I only see big things in the future. So when you become like that guy, just don't forget the little people along the way. You know?
We wouldn't be like, we wouldn't, this all started with me just sending you a message on LinkedIn.
I know, that's crazy.
And here we are.
That's crazy.
So don't be afraid, everyone, just to take that leap of reaching out to someone.
Yeah.
For every person that replied, maybe a couple hundred people didn't even reply to me.
Right.
But I've built the most amazing friendships and relationships just by taking a second just to
send a message.
Send a message.
Yeah. And I appreciate it.
You never know.
I credit HR leaders with really, truly helping me find my voice.
But you had to say yes.
I had to say yes.
So this is the difference, right? You had to say yes to that first podcast. Then you spoke at one of our events. And then people start reaching out to you being like, really good, come speak at our events. And that's how it just takes one moment of saying yes and seeking discomfort led to a ripple effect of probably, I'm not taking credit for this, you maybe even not even writing the book if you didn't do that.
Right. I mean, because I had to believe in my own voice.
Yeah.
I had to believe in it. Yeah.
We can talk to Eva, so let's wrap it up.
Yeah.
Anything else that we've missed? Do you want to shout out or just talk about?
No. If you're looking for me, if you're looking for a speaker, if you're looking for a consultant,
there we go. Now you're going to get lobby.
An advisor, call me.
Don't blame me for all the emails you're about to get.
Call me. I am willing. As you see, I travel.
Yeah.
So
amazing.
I'm happy to chat and talk and meet.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, we'll wrap it up there. Thanks so much again.
Thank you, Shane.